Life presently, opening sentence, paragraph 1, sentence 1. Life presently requires that humanity indulge in inconclusive conversations. Now, this is getting down to a more personal level and slightly over to the left. You're right. A bureaucracy. Bureaucracy being the infinite shuffling about of responsibility. The bureaucracy that I was referring to metaphorically, assuming I was, is like the infinite hole into which, or the infinite hole of, a kind of bureaucratic techno-babble. But down at the individual level, it has never been referred to in this manner, it's never been looked at in this particular way. But people, as a rule, ordinarily, and I'm going to point out to you where there are apparent three-dimensional exceptions, attempted exceptions. There are no such things as absolute exceptions, or there wouldn't be exceptions. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that. If it's actually an exception, that's another story. Ordinarily, people, and they don't realize it, ordinarily they're engaged in a kind of individual, social, conversational bureaucracy. That is, everything, generally speaking, is inconclusive. Now, although it's not referred to that way, and it's certainly not looked at as a necessary component of life growing, which I'm about to point out certain aspects thereof, other than that, and not being referred to in those words, the reality of this still furnishes soil for ordinary people in the city to make accusations at one another. Such as, this is not new, but the term seems to be 20th century, that is the failure to communicate. Husbands and wives, lovers, parents and children going and paying psychiatrists, psychologists money for them to sit there and to bitch at one another about we don't communicate. Nobody sees anything at all humorous in that. Of course, ordinary people don't see anything humorous in life because, why? They don't have anything to compare it to. See, and that's why jokes are funny. Is you can compare what the punchline is, although you don't analyze it, but you compare the punchline to what you expected, which was not the punchline. If you expected, you already heard it, so it wasn't funny. But in the city, people go and they pay money for a third party, apparently, to sit there and for them to talk about how they don't communicate. People also, throughout history, continually say, while beating their breast and if they're poets and grabbing at their heart, that they can't seem to find the words to say what they mean. And, of course, we've got this time-honored tradition to which even groups like this are not immune, and that is, well, I didn't understand what you said. I didn't know you meant Tuesday of this year. Well, when you said we were going to do so-and-so, I didn't think you meant in our lifetime. All right. Now that at least here, and I can hear on tape some of you people also chortling along, now that I have your attention through that devilish trick of humor, which, just think, if the Pope ever catches on to this. Of course, now I got to admit, according to all the news, the films I see, he gets hundreds of, well, thousands and thousands of people out there staying to hear him talk. But if he ever caught on to this, he wouldn't have to wear those funny clothes. He could, to get him there, he could dress as sane and middle class as me and show up if he just knew that the humor would get them all going and snapping their little Italian fingers. But now that I have your attention, besides all those examples, I want you to realize, think right quick, just follow me. In life, you and your closest friends, you and your husband, your wife, your lover, your children, your parents, people at the job, what are conversations? Now, of course, they're energy exchanges, but I'm getting into specifically, people are driven in the city to snip and nip at the heels of conversations, believing they're finding fault, and it's just yet another aspect of the city either falling apart or not being put together correctly yet, which is not. But what they find as being a fault that they don't analyze as inconclusive conversations, which I'm giving you a name for, I want you to see is a part of the continuing process of life growing. That there cannot be conclusive conversations. Not on any kind of widespread basis. I refer you back to the kind of examples I pointed out that are in a sense of no great consequence. You could see this as to give you some breathing room to start from. You could see this as a kind of conclusive conversation. Sir, do you know what time it is? Yes, it's 4 o'clock. Thanks a lot. And that's it. You could see that as being a conclusive conversation if you want to. It's of little consequence, very little energy going on. If such things as this, these strangers passing the ships in the night, just a little verbal byplay, it takes 10 seconds. If that actually was any consequence, it would not be of so little consequence, right? Then if you go up and say, sir, what time is it? And it would go on for another 5 or 6 hours. You and this person would suddenly fall into a great verbal interchange, right? It's simply of no great consequence, but I want you to see that there is something to compare it to. Now the rest of it, of people talking, very intimately, face to face, in each other's space, about things of, God, I missed you. Let's play lovers. You know, God, I missed you. Really? Yeah. Well, probably everybody's been through something like that, or, boy, I couldn't wait for you to get back home from your trip. Ah, really? Ah, are you sure? Well, and it should. All right. There have been even directors and writers and films have tried to do this kind of cinema verite, I guess, and to use dialogue is just these kind of snippets. The Italians did it for a while back in the 50s and the 60s, and I know they got written up by some of the critics, but as far as ordinary, the middle class listen to that, it'll drive you nuts. You know why? Because you didn't go out to pay $5 to hear what you can sit at home and hear. But they tried. It's no great feat to literally do it, but that is the norm of conversations. Does everybody follow me? That conversations, as a rule, you may have, in a sense, if you could see it, you might have. This is not incorrect for me to say it this way. You could have a conversation between a man and a woman, let's say, that lived together for 40 years, that was actually one sentence. Well, some of you heard that. And it actually never came to a conclusion. You can certainly, maybe some of you will see this easier, have a conversation between a mother and a son or daughter that started back as far as you can remember. Let's pretend you're playing the son or daughter part. That you can remember starting back at the age of 4, and she died last year, or maybe she's still alive. And in a sense, there's been one sentence, and it's been an inconclusive conversation. Now, when I say inconclusive, I don't mean necessarily that both of you or either one of you feel continually irritated and frustrated by it. What I mean is, though, that the conversation never came to a conclusion. It is an open-ended, oral, verbal energy exchange going on. Here in person and out there on tape, I see still too many perplexed looks. So let me try the other great historic way to go in the other direction. All right? Now, I've pointed out heroes in literature being people of few words. Now, it's just one block over, so to speak. Let's go to villains, anti-heroes. Let's just take films, which is good a history as any, good reflection. The speech of gangsters. Continually, historically. The speech of gangsters in film and literature, but let's use American film. One way that you know it's gangsters, one way that you know the guy is a dyed-in-the-wool, card-carrying bad guy, is he will speak in conclusive sentences. The great classic scenes of a mafia don sitting there and he motions to one of the henchmen, and the guy comes to the door, and he says, "Go find Charlie. If you don't have the money, kill him." And the guy goes, "Got you, boss." And he says, "Well, if he does have the money, get it and then kill him." It is not just the verbal reflection of what sounds to be impending mayhem. I'm suggesting, of course I'm telling you, I'm just being nice. It's the poet in my soul. The medium itself, the sound waves, the interchange of energy, part of it is not just the words of kill him, It is that there is the absolute appearance, the unconditional appearance, that this person is speaking and engaging in, at least a one-sided, conclusive conversation. It's not the same now, as you should see, and it's not just the words themselves, but it is not exactly the same as the hero being a man of few words. It's not just a few words, it's in this case, it is conclusive words. And there are even variations. If he calls in the guy and he says, go find Charlie, and if he ain't got the money, kill him. And the henchman goes, boss, you realize Charlie, you've known him since you were a child, and he used to be one of our, and he says, do you want to die? And the guy looks funny, and the boss says, shut up. And the guy goes, oh. It's not just a matter of being a few words. He is speaking in conclusive conversation. No conditions. He doesn't give any alternatives. It's conclusive conversation. I am telling you, and it's not just American gangster movies. You can go back and find it in Greek plays, find it in early Roman or European literature. It's just everywhere, and your nervous system knows this. It's just never been pointed out in words, that there is a living, vibrating threat, a villainous sheen and tone and tenor itself to conclusive conversation. Another way to look at this right quick that they might in the city is to say such things as, well, all right, if you're going to portray a real villain, in this case this so-called Don of a Costa Nostra family, if he's going to really be mean, he's got to be mean through and through. You cannot, in the length of a movie or in most books, you cannot take the trouble to try and show any humane side, to show him out later petting his puppy. You know, if you're going to get on with it, the guy's just mean through and through. Another way of seeing that, another way of talking about that, another way of doing it that people don't know it when they're doing it, of course, is what I just pointed out. You don't have to show the guy himself, this chief villain, killing people. All you've got to do is have him speak in conclusive language, and it will do it. And nobody really knows why. It's never been analyzed, so I can't say that everybody should have known this. They never even looked at it that way. This kind of information was never available verbally. It is showing no conditions. For those of you who didn't catch it when I went through the second part of the scenario, the variation of the henchman trying to say a few words about Charlie, and the Don not only would not hear the words, he asked this guy, would you like to die with him? There is no room to maneuver. A bureaucracy. It's not my job. Well, look, I've been to 5 different departments today. I had to stay from work. My wife's sick. They, in essence, a good bureaucracy tells you what? You won't die. I told you it wasn't my job. Get out of here. All right? In a sense, the villain is saying, now this is according to how fast you can look, he's either saying it is my job, or he's saying conclusively it's not my job and there is no appeal. In either case, what he's doing beyond the words is he is engaging in conclusive conversation, and that is not a sign of life. That is not a creative reflection, or it's not a reflection of anything creative. It is almost stillborn. You're not producing a verbal child. You're not producing a verbal scenario about go find Charlie, and if he doesn't have the money, kill him. It's not like, well, all right, we gave birth here, and the kid doesn't look all that sharp. I mean, you got the looks on him. He's either going to be a septic tank cleaner outer or an attorney. And if at least we were back in Sparta days, the husband and wife might think, you know, should we let him live? Conclusive conversation. There's no life. It is almost as though this particular energy exchange between at least 2 people is stillborn. It gets out of somebody's mouth, but it just drops. Now the play may go on, the movie may go on, that may be part of the plot, that they go out and find Charlie, and it weaves off somewhere else about Charlie's problems. But right there, that scene, what else can you do with it? And we're not talking about the possible aspects of movie making, you understand. We're talking about what happens to nervous systems. Where else can you go with that some guy, the dominant guy in this scene, he don't have to have on just a pinstripe suit and a dark tie and a dark shirt and a white tie. They know what they're doing without knowing it. All of life does. It's a dominant figure, and he says, hey, and this other guy ambles in, and the dominant speaking to a submissive. They're in their own dance, these two guys. All sorts of things going on. The dominant guy sitting down, the other one standing up, the dominant guy going, the submissive guy coming in. At any rate, you know it without knowing it. The dominant guy says, go find Charlie, and if he ain't got the money, kill him. Where are you going with that? Now the guy, of course, can nod and say, got you, boss, and leave. And the camera can stay there. The scene can continue in the Don's office, and he can go into some other business. But as far as the dance, even though it may not be physical right then, but as far as the dance between the Don and Charlie, and the structure, this missing money, where are you going with that scene? Now, of course, forget movies right quick, in real life. Where are you going with a scene if conclusive conversation enters into the dance between two people? Go find Charlie, and if he ain't got the money, kill him. And the camera keeps running. Oh, okay, boss, and he leaves. Or he stands there for a minute. What are you going to do? And they start as they do on live TV. You know, look, is the camera still on? It doesn't matter whether they got a written script or not. I'm asking you in real life, where can it go after conclusive conversation? The answer is nowhere. Life presently requires that man indulge continually in inconclusive conversation. And although the term has never been used and people in the city are not going to look at it this way, and it's of no consequence other than to the few people out in the bushes, you need to see that much of what goes on as self-criticism, attacks on one another in the city, is simply this reality, which is a necessity. Besides gangster talk, how about this? Now, this has happened more to people here that I have in person than you people out of town that I very seldom see, and some of you I've never seen. And I guess some of you may be seeing this tape, if it's still around after I die. I don't guess I'll ever see you. How about this? Is anybody aware of the fact, see if you can listen before I say it right quick, that I've used this kind of stuff on some of you people? More individually than I ever have in general. But of almost dealing on something that may start off of apparently no consequence, semi-consequence, middle echelon consequence, and somewhere along the way, or maybe in the beginning, I just deal with it in an absolute condensed, to say the least, blunt, crude way of, do so-and-so. And then some of you want to say, well, could we do? And I say, spare me the details. I never really said that because, well, I never said that before Kyroots said it, if you remember. Because even I watched verbally what I was doing, but that was the extent of it. That was the intent of me engaging in conclusive conversation of, would you like to do something? Yeah, would you want to go take care of something? Yeah, all right. What I want you to do is such and such. What would next Thursday be? You want to take care of it tonight? Should I do it with my left hand or right hand? And I've had some of you get a dazed look in your face. I've gotten several times. Some of you tried your best. You skated right to the edge of being offended. Some of you skated, one or two of you in the last several years, skated up to the edge of wondering, was I upset about something else? Was I finally coming apart? And it's not, I'm not here talking about me and my methods. It is that here is a case that I specifically did it. And then, those of you who have ever been involved with this, is to think back that something was amiss. Something seriously amiss. And it seemed to be over some little minor something. Why did I take such an attitude? And what you were dealing with was what seemed to be conclusive conversation of, hey, go find such and such and kill it. Well, should I? You won't do it tonight. If you don't, forget it. Now, I repeat, I did not bring this up to really speak of any methods I may have used. But I want you to see that this occurs as it occurred to you in real life by me doing it on purpose to some of you. Now, I ask you the possibility of using all of this on yourself. Last time I was pointing out that in a sense people have a bureaucracy. They have the, whether you're looking at it as being a little doll nestled in a bigger doll, or whether you're good enough to see a bigger doll nestled in a smaller doll, whether you're looking up or down, a bureaucracy in people is like the protection so that you could not, even if you were mutant enough in the city sense, inclined to do so, so that you could not suddenly do something very untoward, such as actually change, such as actually say, well, I'll do something and do it. The bureaucracy inside of a person, somewhere staying between either a single ruler or what may appear to be a form of, you know, they used to point out, another aside, the difference between the rule of the few was the oligarchy, like was the rule of most connotations of the wealthy, as opposed to the aristocracy, the rule of the deserving. So whether you feel, back to the track, whether you feel as though a few are running you or one is running you, there needs to be this protection. The court, the bureaucracy in our day and time. And what do? They specialize, if you need it, they specialize, say I, in inconclusive conversation. But then again, look at it. Many people in the city are wired up to find that to be the outstanding soft spot to attack bureaucracy. That is, you can't ever get a straight answer. They will shuffle you from one department to another. By the time you fill out one form, they say, no, wrong form, fill out the blue one. You cannot simply go into a bureaucracy and get a straight answer. Right. What the hell do they think a bureaucracy is for? Somebody told me, I never did see it, that in one of the, I think it was the last review you people put on, I just heard a little bit about it, that you put in a new bit that I never did see, that it was some sort of interview show of a guy that supposedly wrote a book. And I may have all this not exactly right, but it was something about I quit. And supposedly the guy they interviewed had quit smoking, or quit drinking, or a whole combination, quit eating sugar, and a whole bunch of stuff. And so the interviewer sat him down and began to question him about, well, and held up the book, give us the details of how you quit smoking. You know, how long did you smoke? And the guy said, 40 years. And he said, well, how did you quit? And he said, I just quit. Of course, the reviewer, he got the book and he flips To Kill All the Time. He says, well, I mean, you know, how'd you build up to it and what kind of problems? You know, how long did it take? The guy said, well, I just decided to quit and I quit. Well, let's see. Wait, this is even better. Weren't you at one time a heavy drinker? Yeah. Well, now. We know all the problems we have. Now the Surgeon General of the United States is, you know, decided that alcohol is an addictive drug, and the numbers of people we have here that half the hospital beds and outside of surgery wards are taken up by people that in some way have an alcohol problem. So this is something that really touches everybody, the kind of struggles that people go through. How did you quit drinking? The guy said, I quit. Does anybody here, now that I say this, where the real humor of that is, assuming that you actually got the audience to laugh at any of that, the people that showed up, the humor of it is that things are not supposed to be conclusive. Because I'm saying the humor, that not that many of you laughed. You know what's funny about that? It's hilarious. Can you see any possible use internally? You do not deal with yourself. Think about it. You do not talk. At the one end, you know, you've got a talking band of molecules, and then you got a listening band. Of course, you got other bands, feeling and smelling bands. But you have your own. You talk to yourself, and you decide to do something. What kind of conversations do you have? I have a never-ending conversation with you. My apologies to Delaney and Bonnie. But you have been holding a never-ending conversation. Well, tomorrow I'll do so-and-so. If not tomorrow, the next day. Well, maybe I shouldn't go back to, I should build my way up. Well, I'll just forget it for a while. Well, which I guess could be the motto over. Once we reach paradise, and there's this big place where all the bureaucrats go, over there should be that one-word motto, I guess, is, well. But what if there is some possible use of not going along with the necessity on a large scale, but internally of dealing with yourself on a non-conclusive basis. Nah, wouldn't work. Hell yeah, it'd work. That's what's dangerous. That's why it can't hardly be done. Plus, it doesn't even sound interesting. Notice. What does sound interesting? If I was trying to present this to some out in the public as some kind of religion or philosophy or some kind of system that you join up and there's promises made and what would happen, all of those, from the church to whatever the latest crackpot cult is, what could you immediately feel, remember, is pertinent to what I'm talking about now? It's got to be inconclusive. Of course, the great inconclusive, if you can follow this, is the religion's always using that the payoff is after death. Now, you can't beat that as being inconclusive. That do all this stuff, and the contract between God, or us being His bureaucracy, the contract is, do everything we want you to do now, which is, may seem like a big deal, like 60 years worth of sweat and giving up a lot of fun, but what's 60 years compared to eternity? And of course, the little human mind goes, whoo! But the great inconclusive conversation here is, all right, you're going to get a payoff that makes this 60 years worth of hardship nothing. Your payoff is blah, blah, blah after death. The ultimate inconclusion. The rest of it, it's always a matter of struggle. It's always a matter of some leader saying, well, I can't do it either. We're all in this together. We're all going to struggle. You have ups and you have downs. Sometimes you got to take a back step. Sometimes, and it's all an inconclusive conversation. Always. If it's not, you've got one of the few instances, again, if I must point out, that you have what literally suits the definition of a fanatic. It's not that he knows anything, but he's absolutely sure of his ignorance. Well, if you can hear me, a good villain is a fanatic, the Don that I said. So you can have, this is not the norm. That's what I want you to see, but it does happen. That there are fanatics. But the rest of it, the flow of ordinary general life, is based upon inconclusive conversations. And not just between lovers, not just between husbands and wives. Now can you see the structure is larger? Conversations, as it were, which are a form of a structure between nations, between epochs of history, between religions, between hemispheres, between organs of life's body. They have conversations. Why are wars never conclusive? They're not meant to be. Group A beats Group B, and what happens? Look back historically, 20 years later, Group B is rearmed right under their nose, and people look back historically and go, how in the world could they let that happen? Or put another way, no battle's really ever won. Because the vanquished is always mad. They're always fighting to get revenge, whether it's two kids fighting on the playground, or whether it's the French and the Germans, or the Russians and the Germans, or everybody in the Germans. Don't rat me. I could be an Anglo or a Saxon for all you know. God, that's frightening. Never mind. Wars are never over. I'm just using that as one example. You can look historically at what seems to be one religion trying to woo in the people, a philosophy, what is oftentimes called a culture, one culture trying to absorb another one. The Chinese, as much as they claim that I suppose that they are at least racially, if not culturally, kin to, for a while, the Mongolians, and then the Russians fighting, and then over the Mongolian areas and the people, and then the Chinese taking over Tibet. But it's never finished. If it's finished, then that was the end of one conversation. If it is finished between two nations fighting, one nation trying to absorb another one, if indeed the conversation does get periodized, do you understand that that's the end of it? There is no more energy there, and that truly is the end of it. And that sort of thing really fades from history. That is not what's remembered. What's remembered are the inconclusive conversations. The philosophical ideas that sound great and nobody ever did them. The philosophical ideas that sounded great and a few people tried them and they never get anywhere, and now it comes back around. And now it's retrograde Aristotle and his ideas of philosophical kings. Somewhere in life's body, they couldn't let go of that. So it keeps popping back up. But it's always inconclusive. It's not historical. If it died, if there was a conclusive conversation going on between two groups of people, two ideas, two philosophies, and it actually concluded itself, it is at best an offshoot footnote in history. Because history does not remember the dead, really. And by dead, I mean that which concluded itself. That one group, there is no good 3D description of this. You may think that I'm giving one, but it's not. But it'd be that one group, one country finally got this other country and said, listen, we've been fighting on and off for the last 40 years, and every time we beat you, 2 years later you come back, so. And this one group, and rubs their heels and just absolutely annihilates them, just absorbs them, and that's the end. You never hear that group. Do you understand that that was conclusive? But you don't hear about that. That is not the way history is remembered. It's not even the way it's written. Even history, that which seems to be in the past, dead, unchangeable, if it's remembered as being of any significance, if you can see it, and I can't stand here now, we don't have time, and I wouldn't anyway, I don't guess, to point out a long string of examples, but everything historically that is remembered of being some importance, that makes it into the books, that you hear about it, you read about it, in a sense was inconclusive, or it wouldn't be remembered. Do you hear me? People are still thinking about it. They're still writing about it. And it's not just on the basis, although they say it is, and the city it's true enough, that a historian says, well, we have got to write about the split of the Roman Catholic Church. And they can go on for blah, 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 of how this had ramifications, and it began to define the East as being a true political entity separate from Western Europe, how it brought about the great division between the ideas of the Trinity and the Christian religion, and then into the Greek and Russian Orthodoxy. They can say all that. And they can say, well, it had historical significance. I'm not saying it didn't, but that's only a flawed version. That's an incomplete version. It still has significance, or it wouldn't be remembered. It still has significance. The future entered man yesterday. Nobody can see it. Now, they believe it. They try to bring it about on the basis their psychological things happened to me in my past, and so that's obvious, yes. What I'm doing now is affected by what happened to me. No. I guess I'll have to do mine better. Four-dimensionally speaking, the future entered man yesterday. Not culturally, not externally. So the schism of the Christian religion, that is not concluded, or it would not be a historical important fact. I guess I'm getting too strange for Friday, so I won't push that, but that's a fact. If it's good and dead, if the thing really got concluded, if the Attila and all of his buddies had really swept down and just really trampled out just all vestiges of civilization from the Greeks and the Romans, at least vis-a-vis Western history, if they had really done their business before history decided to change from the Dark Ages to the Middle Ages, if they had really done their business, the whole idea, the whole recollection of Attila and all the Huns and the Garths and the Visigoths and the insurance salesmen, they would not be remembered. If they had actually come in and thought, stuff civilization, we hate anything that looks like light or fire or window panes or underwear, shampoo, and they just really stamped out everything, you wouldn't know about it. It wouldn't be in history books. Of course, those of you really fleet of mind, if they'd actually done it, we wouldn't be sitting here for me to tell you about it. Not you and I as we are. But at any rate, if anything is remembered, not just by you, but by history, which is a structure, if it is remembered in life's nervous system as being a past, fait accompli, a done deed, that something happened, but it had some significance, blah, 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 the way it affects things. No, it's not just that it had some significance that sort of affects things. It was inconclusive. It has not been concluded, or we wouldn't remember it. It would not be a historical, important entity, an occurrence. Now, back into you. What do you remember about your life? Well, there's a string of fairly important things that have happened to me that probably shaped my destiny and who I am. The only things you remember are those things that are inconclusive. That's all. Or it's of no importance. In the city, that's the way things are supposed to be. But if you had any possibility of using the yellow circuit, I keep saying the way that even the yellow circuit thinks it is, how about the way I'm telling you that can be used? you would look at it, just a little prodding, and absolutely, if possible, the other direction. Those things that were conclusive is what I should have been basing my life on. I mean, if it's just one, if one thing conclusive happened to me, looked at the way I've been operating, the way everybody else operates, and now I do see that everything that everybody else says affected them was inconclusive. What the whip? The way my mother treated me. There's no period after that. It's a continual whining. You're still whining. She's been dead 20 years. You're still whining about it because it is inconclusive. If you remember it as being a piece of important historical occurrence to you, individually, personally, in your little heart of hearts, it was inconclusive. It is still inconclusive because you can't have an inconclusion in the past and that suddenly changed. So, if you could just use a yellow circuit as I'm telling you, just that, as it could be used, you would look upon everyone else and you up until now operating on the basis that all things inconclusive, if I was going to take a psychological approach and believed in the out there, then all things inconclusive are those things that have shaped my destiny. And the yellow circuit would go, whoa, dude. Whoa. God. Just for a flash there, it struck me, what if I could look at it in the opposite direction? What if, instead of that, I could find maybe just one? Of course, it might strike the yellow circuit right quick that there may not be one. But what if there's just one conclusive something's happened to me? Why would I not take that and make that the cornerstone of me? Why would that not be? If it was just one little cornerstone, why would I not try to get on that one thing and go from there? Go ahead. We got to turn the tape over. Who did the sculptures on the back wall back there? Is that Bill? God, I like that. Is he here?
Is that
Huh? We ready? Well, I guess I'm going to leave this other than to, again, point and assure you, some of you already hear it, that there is something dastardly, there is something dangerously dastardly within that. If you could deal on the basis of coming to conclusions, if you could even find if there are things that have conclusively happened, even things that have been conclusively said, just start from the verbal. One of the problems is to show you again how the 3D world is not at fault, why I am not in some way that I've worked myself up or tricked myself or taken dope and got some story to tell you that one day in 1957 I suddenly got out of bed and went, wow, or that I deserved it, or that I got reformed. You ought to be able to begin to feel this yourself, to find it interesting that your memory, if I say, a whole bunch of you followed me a couple of minutes ago about talking when I was giving the example that a person, if they could use a yellow circuit, just the yellow circuit the way I'm describing it, would say, wait a minute, instead of all this inconclusive stuff, let me find at least one thing conclusive that happened and go from there. Let me try that approach. Now I'm saying, all right, how about just one thing conclusive that was ever said to you? Now here's what you should find interesting. Think right quick, and you cannot readily think of anything. Why? I've already described to you, history does not even remember that which was conclusive. If anything conclusively happened to you, as far as the interchange, the structure between you and one other person, that your mother, this inconclusive thing, your mother was a drunk and she mistreated you and you're still mad about it. And your father disappeared right after you were born and you didn't even see him until you got to be 17 and you finally looked him up and found him. And you found him and you had a few drinks and finally he looked at you and he said, I never did want kids, to tell you the truth, but now that you found me and I've been talking to you, I like you. Now this is not psychological, and it's really got nothing to do with people individually. That's the way your mind thinks right now. But you understand that that could be a conclusive conversation? You and he might not ever seen each other after that. And it has no great significance in your life because it came to a conclusion. Let us say that your nervous system and his, it was like, well, you found me, we had a few drinks, and I never did want kids, but now I met you, you ain't bad. Hey, Look me up next time you're in California. You go, well, I will, and you left. Now, if somebody brings it up, if I got to give you a breathing room again, and about your father, and hey, didn't I hear that you found your father and went to look for him? Oh, yeah, I did. Well, what happened? Oh, well, I had a few drinks and talked, and what kind of guy was he? Well, he's about 6'2". He's all right. It has no historical significance if it came to a conclusion, just verbally. So if you try to think back, what important in my life? Did my father one day, or my mother, or this aunt, I only see her once or twice a year, and she used to always come around on holidays, and she would grab me and say, boy, I sure do love you. And she'd hug me. I always feel good about it when I think about her. How often do you think about it? Never. What seemed to be the exchange, what seemed to be between you and this aunt, this uncle, seemed to be conclusive. The conversations, she would just come in and go, oh, you've grown again, whether you were 5 or 15 or 25. She'd say, God, I'm always glad to see you. I think about you a lot. You say, well, me too, and neither one of you do. But you just run over and you grab her and you hug her and she hugs you and go, oh. And she says, well, I got to go see the rest of the family. And that may be the last word that's said, and she's there 2 or 3 days on the holiday. And you never think about her again. But you see her, you feel her, you and her nervous system grab each other, and you're just as happy you would fight off a gang full of hoodlums that tried to attack her while you're there with her. You just beam. I mean, she can see across the room. That may be the last time you touch or even speak over a period of several days with her, then, would you pass the butter? But then you see her across the room and you wave. You're just as happy. But you never think about her. She is not a historical important figure or dance in your life. Why? Because it seems to be conclusive. There seems to be nothing else, and you and her go, ooh, ooh, and hug, love you too, see you in a little while, and you walk away. It's not much more than, hey, buddy, you know what time it is, 4 o'clock. The things you do remember is what I'm saying you should find interesting. They are all inconclusive. It's all loose ends. That's your whole life. That's the way it's supposed to be. And of course, people end up, if you're going to take that even verbal description, seeking out religions, cults, philosophies, drugs, alcohol, in a sense, to try to find some way to take all these loose ends. My shirt's unraveling, my dress is coming undone, it keeps running up, it's getting higher and higher. Somebody, scotch tape, spit, I try to hold it, it won't work. In religion, it's supposed to stop this unraveling, or at least take the loose ends and whip them up somewhere. But they don't. The ultimate, as I was saying, in a sense, the ultimate kinds of manifestations of inconclusive conversations are the very things that you would think are doing it. Religions, or in our day and time, psychiatry. What can be more inconclusive? You lay down, you pay the guy in advance $200, and you say, boy, I'm glad I finally decided to go into analysis because my life is terrible, and now I've got you here to explain it to me. And the psychiatrist says, when do you think I can do that? And you go, God, here it goes again. It is, in a sense, some of you laughed at me talking about religion. In another sense, brought more up to date, analysis, psychiatry, psychology is an even better example of the inconclusive conversation. Well, doctor, do you think I'll ever get any better? I don't know, do you? Well, I've been coming to you now for 3 years. Do you think I've improved? Do you? Do you think I should continue analysis? What do you think? Then people pay money. Back to you internally. What could be less entertaining? What could be less complex? What would be a shorter movie than if in some way you could tell yourself, why don't we do so-and-so? And some of the people go, yeah, we probably should. You go, so be it. And the people say, well, wait a minute, what if Charlie don't have the money? He's been a nice guy. And you say, do you want to go with him? No. What if you could be the guy in the interview? This big build-up, all the excuses, making all the whining for all the other people about why such and such is so difficult, and yet you did it, and of course wrote a book, since misery loves publicity. And you wrote a book, so tell us, what is your method? I quit. Yeah, but, what else did you do? Besides quit? What else is there to do besides quit? You would never be invited to another talk show. They couldn't make a movie of your life. When they ask you, can we do your life story? I don't have a life story. Well, you must have done something. Yeah, I quit having a life story. And after that, what happened? It's invisible. It's one of the things I can't talk about. And of course, the revolutionists wouldn't tell the person they couldn't talk about it. But it's up to this point. I quit. Yeah, but then what? What is there after I quit? Yeah, but people spend years and years, and they go through hypnosis, and they got new drugs, and they even shock people, adverse therapy. And so we know the problem. And now the Attorney General, not just alcohol, is on the verge of trying to classify nicotine as an addictive drug. So, boy, an interviewer says, and I've been through this before, so how did you quit smoking? I quit. Yeah, but... And then they want even more, like, well, how'd you keep from losing weight? The thing is, we're talking about smoking, right? Yes. Now, of course, now I'm doing that which would not take place. You ask me how I quit. Yes, I quit. Nobody in the city is satisfied with that. Well, what else? How'd you do it? You just quit? Yeah. And the interviewer has to go then. You've got 25 more minutes. So he says, well, okay. So to keep up the inconclusive conversation. Okay, all right. More power to you, I guess, sir. But, hey, how about the other problem? Putting on the old weight. The conversation was, we started out talking. You wanted to get to a conclusive conversation. If this could happen, this kind of verbal byplay I'm doing now. You asked how I did so-and-so, and I said I did it. And you're not satisfied. Of course, the interviewer can say, well, I got 25 more minutes to kill. Or your answer doesn't satisfy anybody. Other people can't do that. It makes no sense. We don't believe it. All of that is simply a smokescreen. It is misdirection of life, saying, I cannot generally use conclusive conversation. Energy will not keep moving. As any good subdivision, a few cul-de-sacs are all right. Every day a few cells die in your body. Every day on this planet a few people drop dead. But in general, things have got to keep going. The arteries of communication, of transportation have got to be left open. Commerce has got to flow. Taxis have got to come in and out. The powerful got to step on the weak. The weak got to holler, I love it. Somebody got to dance forward. Somebody's got to dance backwards. Groups of people got to holler, we should stop doing so-and-so. And another group holler, yes, we should. When will we start? We don't know. How will we know if we finish? We can't even start. It must go on. It's the same thing. Those kind of conversations about I should do so-and-so, you can look at them as far as the wheels of commerce and transportation. It's like intersections, four-way stop signs, or flashing yellow lights. You wait a second, but then it's got to go on. Maybe we should do so-and-so. If we did, we'd put on weight. Well, you're right. Maybe I should do so-and-so. You tried it before. Yeah, you're right. But it's not the end. It is inconclusive. It'd be as conclusive, if you can hear this right quick, if somebody said, I believe I'll stop drinking. And then you went, no, I won't. And that's it. That's it. You can carry it further if I'm going to have to in the 3D world. You might see him that he finally dies a slow, painful death. So I hear fluorosis of the liver. But he'd never have another word to say about it. That if sometime he went, we should quit drinking. From the bureaucracy, the people, the king one day, in a day's condition, wherever it came from, we should quit drinking. Nah. He quit thinking about, he quit responding to that conversation of we should quit drinking. Or to put in a more positive way, at least figuratively, and then you say, well, should I drink or not drink? All right, I'm going to drink. And that was the conclusive conversation. You do know, and this is not even speaking about alcohol, that's not the point, that life cannot operate on that basis. Everything must be in a state of non-ending flux. All sentences must be open-ended. All bureaucracies must have an infinite number of desks and people through which all responsibility can be infinitely shuffled. You cannot come to a place, not and expect to go any further, that you hand it to somebody and they conclude your conversation. Sir, madam, God, I hope you can help me. I have been to see 1,000 different people at 1,000 different desks, and no sooner do I start describing the problem, they say, go see him. Have I finally reached a place to help that I can get a conclusive answer? God forbid. The person say, yep, you did it. You were there. Because that's your last stop. That is the same basis out in life. And yet everyone feels at the city level incomplete, frustrated, there's never an end. My enemies are never fully overcome. My dreams are never fully fulfilled. Everything I start to do goes off in another direction. Everything I try to do, by the time I get it going just halfway good, I forget about it. I trip and hurt myself. I don't know what happens. What happens is you are still subject to the required indulgence in inconclusive conversation. There's something I do want to get in. Several things. All right, two things. We got that much time. It is the season. Abrupt change of subject. It is the periodic season again. In the last several months, I've had communications from out of town, and I've had several here recently. That is, people here in Atlanta, we've had some new people come in the last 6 months, and in other cities getting these tapes, we have, in a sense, new people coming in and going at all odd hours, coming in and seeing these tapes, and some people hang around for a while and some people become a part of those other city groups, and some people semi-hang around the groups, and a whole spectrum. But at any rate, there is a seasonal activity that always happens with new people that I wanted to bring up, since I have been having these drop from the trees again, which coincides with bad apple weather, doesn't it? I'm not sure there's a parallel, but it's this, that new people that get involved with this, very shortly, many of them then in some way communicate to me either their temporary, just absolute delight at the older people in the group, or else their terrible disappointment with other people's humanity here. And normally, as I said, there's a season that people hang around this for a little bit, and they'll make sure that they've written me several times, or I know that they're out there in some other city, or that they're here. But then they communicate to me. And they're combinations. Some people have done both. But often, people will say, I just wanted to write you a note and tell you, not only there's not much of that, any mention of me, but then they'll say how much just meeting these new people out here in Miami or New Orleans or Los Angeles, how much this has meant to me, that these people are just exceptional, and just being around them and being at the meetings, just hanging around after meetings and talking about basketball or nothing. Just what a delight. Oh, what a delight. Then I get the ones that are on this basis. And sometimes it's from people that's already been through the first stage. And sometimes they just start off here of how much the tapes, hearing me talk, reading something I wrote, how much it's meant, and they believe their life is now finally on a different and perhaps a correct track. And they really enjoy me. But I got to tell you, it's really become, I just can't believe that there's been people that are still hanging around you that I get the impression they've been here for some number of years. And the things that they do, I just can't believe it. Supreme disappointment at some of the older people in the group. Now, let me ask you people. I don't know whether to tell you not to write me. Justice will prevail. It's a rhetorical question. I continue to receive this, and I don't mean it's any hardship on my part to receive it. But let me ask you this great musical, if not rhetorical question. What am I to do with this? What should I do with this? Am I to spend my energy on the obvious cubed? Am I to be concerned about the complaints of the new person? Or should I be concerned over the new person? Should I be concerned that new people find some of you older people to be delightful, inspiring, some kind of role model? Or should I be concerned that you feel otherwise? Should I have any concern? Should I have any concern over that? There is that great commandment that is very often forgotten. I don't think I'll repeat it again tonight, because sometimes I take sneak previews and I know that Kyroots got a version of that coming up in several weeks. But all of you who are interested, you can remember that I started to tell you it's one of the more, if not most, forgotten revolutionist commandments. So the next couple of weeks, show you what kind of memory you got. It'll pop up one night from another source and see if you remember it. The other thing I wanted to say is that everybody involved with this should be careful of a certain always present possibility of occurring. And that is, you should not fall into a kind of self-structure trap. And by self-structure, remember I was talking about structures are between two entities, two living, cellular entities, whether they be individuals, whole nations, ideas. But now, I want you to listen right quick, a self-structure. And the self-structure is this. Let me give the example. You got to watch this. Let us say that you are very interested in music. You've got to watch becoming a, let's put it in quotation marks, and, quotation marks, unrecognized composer of 127 great symphonies, end quote. Or you become this self-structure of we'll put it in quotation, an unjustifiably overlooked and unpublished poet of 3,000 poems. Now I could do it other ways of just decent people, young sexy woman, young good-looking, semi-good-looking man, but regardless of that, inside I'd be a hell of a catch for some woman. If you don't watch it, everybody becomes a part of a self-structure. Let me use more blatant examples, or back to the one. Do you understand? We got this little guy, little girl, singing around trying to write music, symphonies. Now I can't remember how many, if we're going to be charitable and call them symphonies, Mozart and Haydn, they got up into the hundreds, those little teeny symphonies. But let's say that you've been sitting in a dark basement up in New York, and we're talking about real symphonies, you know, the Mahler type symphonies, 4 and 5 hours, and you have written 127 symphonies of that length. And nobody will listen. Nobody will pay any attention. Nobody's ever heard them. You can't even get a practice group together to try and play this. But rather than you being originally this artist, this individual person, with this individual interest, this individual hobby, that was interesting enough that you sat down and wrote 127 full-length symphonies. But then it will reach a point that you're no longer that individual. You're now simply a small piece of this larger structure. And your small piece, you become your own structure. You're now not a composer. You don't think that way. You don't feel that way about yourself. You have become the unrecognized composer of 127 great symphonies. Thank you. That's what you are. You're now almost an example of a living whine. But it's not just self-pity. It's not just any ordinary emotion. It is you are now locked into this structure and you're no longer an individual. Now I'm not predicting whether you had any city future in music or literature or art or being a person. That's not the point. The point is what started out apparently as being some interest, some talent that you were already wired up to have, enough that you pursued it and you wrote X number of novels, poems, symphonies, did paintings. And then it reaches a point, it happens gradually, but people become the structure. They're no longer this composer, whether he is famous or not, published or not, performed or not. He is then not the individual, he is she is a small piece of this larger mechanical organic structure under such names as the unjustifiably overlooked writer of 3,000 poems. That the structure, you being unrecognized, you being a failure at what you thought you wanted to do, being the continual inconclusive statement that I wanted to do so-and-so, I should have been so-and-so, I could have been so-and-so, and I'm not. And now that's part of what you are. to do this, and for your own benefit individually that may appear to be somewhat disconnected to this, but you have got to learn how. You got to see that you should walk away from the structures, abandon the structure, and keep the music. Abandon the structure and keep the art. Keep the interest. But there is no such thing. There is no saleable, there is no useful entity such as, quote, the unrecognized composer of 127 great symphonies. You're done for. You are a finished in conclusion. Abandon the structure. We's out of it.